All right, so get ready because today we are going deep, really deep. We're talking Darwinism, but not like, the stuff you'd find in your average bio textbook. No, no, today we're getting philosophical with it.
That's right. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it, a theory about like snails and finches, and it just caused this huge philosophical uproar.
It did. And for this deep dive, we're going to be using excerpts from, well, it's a pretty heavy hitter, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on Darwinism.
Oh, yeah. This stuff is, well, it's definitely dense, but it's really fascinating too.
It is.
And what's wild is just how relevant these philosophical debates still are, even today, Darwin's ideas, they just keep on challenging us and make us really think about these big, big questions.
Okay, so to keep us on track in this philosophical jungle, the Stanford Encyclopedia, they lay out these six core problems, six big philosophical puzzles that Darwin's theory, well, kind of brought to light.
Exactly. And these aren't just like some abstract thought experiments. They get to the core of like how we understand the natural world and, our place in it.
So let's just take these puzzles one by one, shall we?
Let's do it.
The first one is all about probability and chance. This idea that Darwinism is a statistical theory, it deals with tendencies and likelihoods rather than these absolute certainties. And I have to admit, the first time I came across this, it really kind of threw me for a loop. I mean, if evolution is all about chance, then how can we explain this incredible order and complexity that we just see everywhere in nature? It just seems kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a question that's puzzled philosophers and scientists for a long, long time. How can random variations lead to these really intricate adaptations we see in nature? I mean, it's mind-blowing. And Darwin's answer to that was natural selection. He was arguing that, okay, while variation does arise by chance, natural selection, it's like this filter, It favors those variations that actually increase an organism's chances of survival and reproduction.
So there's still chance involved, but it's not like completely random. Natural selection kind of gives it a direction, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like, imagine a sculptor who is working with the raw material of random variations, but is shaping and refining it over time. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I see that.
But then that brings us to, well, puzzle number 2 on our list. What is natural selection really? Like when you get down to it, is it a force, a principle, a law of nature, or is it just, I don't know, a description of like what happens?
It seems so powerful, this idea of survival of the fittest. But is that actually a force in its own right, like gravity or something else completely?
Well, Darwin himself, he described natural selection as a power, and you can kind of see why he would say that. I mean, it does seem to shape and mold life, like pushing it toward, I don't know, ever greater complexity. But even now, even today, there are these like really heated debates about how we should even understand the nature and the power of natural selection.
It's like you're trying to grab onto something slippery, The more you try to think about it, the more it just kind of like slips away.
Yeah, exactly.
And while we're talking about slippery concepts, there's also this whole debate about teleology. That's the idea of purpose in nature. Does Darwinism just get rid of purpose completely, or does it kind of sneak back in through, like, the back door?
Yeah, the teleology problem. It's a tough one.
It is.
On the one hand, you have natural selection. It doesn't have like a mind or a goal or a blueprint. It just is. But then on the other hand, it produces these organisms that are just so remarkably well suited to their environments, almost as if they were designed for like a specific purpose.
Yeah, it's that paradox that I find so interesting. How can you have this blind, purposeless process that produces these just intricate, purposeful adaptations? It's like saying, I don't know, a watch can assemble itself through a series of random events.
Precisely. And this tension, this apparent contradiction, it's really at the heart of the whole philosophical debate about Darwinism. It makes us face these, well, really fundamental questions about the nature of causality, about how we explain this world that's all around us.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? And actually, to illustrate this point, the Stanford Encyclopedia, they bring up this really interesting case study. It's those guppies, the ones with the red spots.
Oh, yeah, those little guys. They're like a philosophical puzzle swimming around in a fish tank.
Right.
Yeah, I remember reading about them. It's fascinating.
They really show how complex this whole adaptation and purpose thing is. You see, those red spots, well, they attract potential mates, but they also, at the same time, make the guppies way more visible to predators. Classic trade-off.
So it's like a risky fashion statement in the guppy world. Flashy, but, well, could be dangerous too. Exactly. But here's the thing. The prawns that eat these guppies, they're actually colorblind to red. So in their specific environment, the red spots, they don't actually put them at a disadvantage when it comes to like avoiding those predators,
Hmm.
but they give them a huge advantage when it comes to, attracting mates.
Hold on. So it's like evolution found a loophole,
Yeah,
like a way to have the best of both worlds.
it really seems that way, yeah. And that's where the whole purpose thing gets really interesting. The guppies, they didn't like consciously choose to have red spots, right? But natural selection through this whole interplay of mate choice and predator avoidance, well, it favored the ones with the red spots.
It's like nature just stumbled on this elegant solution, even though there's no, like, conscious designer behind it.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there isn't, I don't know, some kind of drive towards complexity and beauty in this whole evolutionary process.
Yeah, it's a question that's really, it's captivated philosophers for centuries. Does the apparent purposefulness of these adaptations point to some kind of like underlying principle of design, or is it just, a byproduct of a blind mechanistic process?
It's enough to make your head spin,
Yeah.
right? And speaking of head-spinning concepts, let's move on to um, the next philosophical puzzle on our list,
Hmm.
the definition of a species. Darwin's ideas, they really kind of threw a wrench into the traditional views on this, didn't they?
Oh, they really did. Before Darwin came along, species, they were often seen as like these fixed and unchanging things. Each one was defined by this unique essence. But Darwin's work showed that species, well, they're constantly evolving and adapting to their environments and changing over time.
So instead of these neat and clear-cut categories, we've got this like messy and ever-shifting landscape of life, right?
Yeah.
But if species are so fluid, how do we even classify them? Where do you even draw the line between one species and another? It just seems, I don't know.
That's the million-dollar question. And it's a philosophical conundrum, really, that people are still debating today. If there are no fixed essences, no hard lines between one species and the next, then how do we even determine what makes a species? How do we even know that our classifications are actually meaningful and, objective?
It's like trying to draw a map of like a constantly changing terrain. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, whoop, the landscape shifts again.
That's a great way to put it. And Darwin himself, he actually recognized that there's a certain, well, degree of arbitrariness in how we classify life. He pointed out that even experienced naturalists, the people who do this for a living, they often disagree on whether a particular group of organisms should be considered a species or just a variety within a species.
So one scientist's species is another scientist's subspecies. That seems like it would just cause complete chaos in the scientific community.
Well, it definitely complicates things, that's for sure. And it highlights the crucial role that human interpretation plays in science. We can't just assume that our categories perfectly reflect some like pre-existing order in nature.
So it's not just about observing the natural world. It's also about how we make sense of it all,
Mhm.
right? How we categorize and classify this. It's an immense diversity of life.
Exactly. And that takes us right back to some of those really fundamental questions in philosophy. Things like the nature of reality, the limits of human knowledge, and, well, the whole relationship between our minds and the world around us.
It's amazing, really, how Darwin's work in biology just opened up these really deep philosophical questions. It's like he opened a door to a whole new way of seeing the world, you know?
I did. He really did. And another door he opened leads to this. Well, it's a pretty fascinating question. How fast does evolutionary change actually happen? Darwin, because he was so heavily influenced by the geologist Charles Lyell, was a big proponent of gradualism.
Ah, yeah. The whole slow and steady wins the race approach. But what about, those jumps that we see in the fossil record? Those moments where it seems like evolution just like took this sudden leap forward.
That's another big point of contention, isn't it? The debate over whether evolution is always this gradual thing or if there are these periods of really rapid change, well, it's been a major philosophical flashpoint within Darwinism.
It's like asking whether evolution prefers a slow waltz or a fast-paced tango.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And the evidence, well, as you can imagine, it's pretty complex and definitely open to interpretation. Darwin himself, he acknowledged that there might be periods of more like rapid change, especially when new variations kind of pop up suddenly. But he still maintained that, for the most part, evolution proceeds at this, well, gradual pace.
So Darwin was a waltz man through and through.
Yeah.
But, okay, what about all the evidence for those evolutionary jumps? How does that fit into the whole picture?
Well, you see, later discoveries, they've introduced this idea of genetic drift. And basically, this says that some evolutionary changes, they can happen purely by chance, especially in smaller populations, without any influence from natural selection at all.
Wait, so you're saying that sometimes evolution is just a, like, random roll of the dice? Like those zebras with the slightly longer stripes, they weren't necessarily, like, better adapted. They just got lucky.
It's, well, a little more nuanced than that, but yeah, you're getting the idea. In these smaller groups, you see purely random fluctuations. They can lead to certain traits becoming, like, dominant, even if those traits don't offer any particular advantage.
So it's not always about survival of the fittest. Sometimes it's survival of the luckiest. That's, I have to say, that's kind of humbling.
It is, isn't it?
Hmm.
It reminds us that chance plays a big role in the grand scheme of things. And of course, there are other factors at play too, like, for example, the complex interaction between evolution and development. This has shown that the pace of change can be a lot more, well, complex than Darwin first thought.
So maybe it's not just a waltz or a tango, but like a whole evolutionary dance floor with everything from slow, graceful movements to these sudden leaps and twirls.
I like that. And this dance, while it continues to fascinate and mystify scientists and philosophers alike, there's still so much we don't know about, the hows and whys of evolutionary change.
It's like we've stumbled into this grand ballroom and we're only just starting to understand the steps.
Yeah, it's really quite something. This one theory, Darwinism, and all these philosophical rabbit holes, it's amazing. Oh, and speaking of rabbit holes, I kind of want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the whole problem of altruism. It seems like, I don't know, it's a real challenge to that whole survival of the fittest idea.
It's a question that Darwin himself, he really struggled with it. And even today, it sparks these, well, some pretty fascinating debates. Like, if evolution is all about competition and, individual advantage, then how do you explain selfless behavior? Why would any organism risk their own well-being, their own safety even, for someone else? That's a tough one. Yeah, it's like when you watch one of those nature documentaries and you see a mother bird risking her life to protect her chicks.
Hmm.
It just seems so, I don't know, counterintuitive from a, like, purely evolutionary standpoint. Shouldn't be all about selfishness.
That's the classic problem. And Darwin, being the amazing observer that he was, he came up with a few ideas. One of them is this concept of group selection. And basically what that suggests is that sometimes the benefit to the group as a whole, it can actually outweigh individual self-interest.
So, like, if you have a herd of gazelles, the ones that stick together and watch out for each other, they might have a better chance of surviving than a herd where, everyone's just out for themselves.
Exactly. Even if some individuals end up being more, vulnerable on the edges of the group, that collective vigilance, that cooperative behavior, it can give a real survival advantage for the herd overall.
But how does that actually work in practice? Wouldn't the selfish gazelles, the ones who hang back and let everyone else take the risks, wouldn't they end up having more offspring and, pass on those selfish genes?
Well, that's the big question at the heart of this debate, and it gets into some really complex stuff about the levels at which natural selection operates. Does it act primarily on individuals, or can it act on groups too? It's hard to say for sure.
Like those Russian nesting dolls, just layers upon layers of complexity. So, I mean, is there a resolution to this whole altruism puzzle? Or is it still up for debate?
Oh, it's definitely still being debated. There are a lot of different theories out there, each with their own, pluses and minuses, but no one's really come up with that single universally accepted answer yet.
So the mystery lives on. I have to admit, that's kind of exciting. It means there's still so much we don't know, so much more to discover about how nature works.
It's true, and that, I think, is Darwin's real legacy. It's not just about the answers, it's about the questions. It's a framework for, I don't know, inquiry that keeps pushing us to understand more.
It's like Darwin gave us a map, but not to some, like, finished landscape. It's more like a map to this huge, unexplored wilderness, just ripe for exploration. And as we've seen today, this wilderness, it's not just biological. It goes way deeper. It's philosophical.
That's a great way to put it. Darwin's work makes us grapple with these, like, truly fundamental questions. Questions about the nature of reality, the role of chance and purpose, what it even means to be a species, and the very basis of morality. It's a journey that takes us right to the core of, well, what it means to be human, to be a part of this whole, intricate web of life.
It really is amazing. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the philosophical side of Darwinism, I'm just left feeling, I don't know, a sense of awe, really. Awe at how complex and beautiful nature is, and just wonder at how powerful Darwin's ideas are, to challenge and inspire us.
I couldn't agree more. Darwin's work, it shows us the power of observation, of curiosity, and just this relentless pursuit of understanding. And it's a journey that's still unfolding, still inviting us to explore and question and discover the hidden depths of, well, our world and ourselves.
That's a great point. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the philosophical ripples of Darwinism. What new questions have come up for you? What assumptions have you had to rethink? We really encourage you to keep exploring, to dig deeper into this rich and, well, let's face it, thought-provoking world that Darwin opened up for us. So until next time, keep exploring.